Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hyfi Preschool and Kids Weekly Training Podcast. Today, I am joined by some of the Hyfi team. I have Kayla here.
Hey, Isaac.
And I also have Rachel.
Hey, Isaac.
I'm so glad that both of you are here, and I'm so glad that you are all here, listeners. Now, this is the preschool-specific podcast for week 4 of July. So in here, we're going to be talking preschool-specific. If you are looking for kids, you can hop out and jump on the kids podcast, but this is the preschool-specific podcast for God Cares When I Hurt. And this week, we are going to be talking about how God cares when I feel mad. Now, some of you, this may feel a little like this is talking right up your alley and you're feeling a little grumpy today. Maybe something has happened and you're driving home and you're having a rough day. Well, guess what? God cares when you feel mad. So we all experience mad and anger in a different way. And my question for all of you today is, what kind of mad are you? There are lots of different kinds of mad. There's like the get red face, there's go silent, there's the I just need to take a walk mad. So Rachel, Kayla, what type of mad are you?
Ooh, this is a telling question. Man, we don't get mad at Lifeway. We're just happy all the time. Isaac, there's no such thing. No, I'm kidding. Man, what kind of mad am I? I feel like I could be any of these kinds of mad depending on the situation. But I would say more often than not, I am the be quiet mad. When I get mad, I am very aware of what I'm feeling, and I don't want to say something that I will later regret. And so oftentimes I will be quiet because I want to work through that emotion before I can come back and talk through it and get to a better solution or a better place.
I understand that. So a lot of people in my family are that type of mad. And growing up, if someone got silent and turned the radio up in the car, that means we were all in trouble. And actually, while I was dating my wife, there was a moment where we were driving home from something and I was going to like drop her off at her apartment. And at one point she just got quiet and turned the radio up. And I was afraid. I dropped her off, said goodnight, all this stuff. And I text my sister. I'm like, oh no, this is what happened. She's like, oh, you're in trouble. Turns out that's just how they drive in the car in her family. She was not mad at all. I held on to that for like 4 months. And that's not how she expresses her anger. It was very different. So people do express their anger in different ways.
Very accurate.
All right, Rachel, what about you? What kind of mad are you?
I'm quiet mad, I think. It takes me a while to get mad usually. So when I do, I often have to process it, like Kayla said. Sometimes whoever's involved wants to talk about it pretty quickly, and I'm slow. It takes me a while to be ready to talk about it.
You're a processor. You're not slow, but you're a processor. You have to think through that. Yeah.
And that's a good thing, because then there are people like me who are not processors and just like, yeah, this is how I feel right now. Let's chat about it. So I'm probably Rachel's worst nightmare in that situation.
I think you're a verbal processor. Like, you have to talk it out in the moment, I feel like, where Rachel needs to kind of go sit with it and then come back.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. Well, we do all experience anger and madness in a different way. This week, we are going to continue the conversation of how God cares when I hurt. And this week specifically, we are going to teach preschoolers how God cares when I feel mad. And preschoolers are going to have a lot of mad feelings, and they're going to experience them in a lot of different ways. And some of this is, hey, how do we respond? But also, it's how can we teach preschoolers to respond when they feel mad, when they feel upset? How can they respond in a way that follows God, and to help remind them that God cares when they are mad? So this week, we are going to look at the story of how God healed a man named Naaman. And this comes from 2 Kings chapter 5. And I'm really excited for this story because Naaman, he has a lot of different emotions in this Bible story. So Kayla, would you mind breaking down why did we choose this story of Naaman and why is it going to be so much fun to teach to preschoolers?
Yeah, listeners, if you've listened to any of our last podcast for preschool for the last few weeks, you'll notice I will say, tune in for the last one. Make sure you listen to the last one. It's going to be really good. It's going to be so important. And I stand by that because we don't talk about this, in my opinion, very much in kids ministry or in preschool ministry. We often talk about sadness or fear or loneliness, but anger isn't just something that we often talk about. And I think it's really important, even at the preschool level, for us to talk about this because this is a universal feeling that we all feel because of the brokenness of our world. Now, what we do with that feeling, how we act on it, is a whole nother matter. But the feeling itself is something that all people are going to feel because of the brokenness that we have in our world. And so I think it's really important, even at this level with preschool, to talk about when we feel mad. And I think this story is really valuable to help teach preschoolers God cares when I feel mad. So you guys might be thinking, okay, Kayla, how does God care when I feel mad? And how is this story even talking about that? So Naaman is the leader of an army, right, in this land of Aram. And he's a really important leader. He's seen as very important, but he has a skin disease. And that is a very kind of lonely, isolating place to be in that culture, in that context, because they didn't have modern medicine, obviously, that we have today. And so how do you cure such a disease so that you can be around other people and do the task at hand? And so there's this servant girl from Israel who served Naaman's wife. And the servant girl tells Naaman's wife about this special prophet in Israel, right, who could cure his skin problem. So Naaman hears about it and he goes. Now, Naaman, being the powerful and important man and leader of this army that he is, arrives at Elisha's house, and he wants to be greeted by this really important, powerful prophet, right? But instead, Elisha sends his messenger out to see Naaman, and Naaman gets mad, right? The messenger tells Naaman, go and wash in the Jordan River 7 times, your skin will be healed and you'll be clean again. And he got so angry and he left. He thought, I deserve to be treated with special attention from this prophet. I am a important and powerful leader, and he sent his servant out here to talk to me. And then he told me to go and wash in the Jordan River that's nasty and dirty and gross. No, is what Naaman said. He was full of pride and full of anger, and he refused to do what the prophet said. Now, was Naaman right to be angry and prideful? No. Was Naaman acting in a sinful way, in a sinful manner? Yes. And that's not the end of the story, right? Naaman's servants who are traveling with him, I can only imagine being a servant of Naaman, traveling all the way to see this prophet. You see what happens. You see that your boss gets so angry and prideful that you all just turn around and go home and don't even try to do what he had to say. And that's essentially what Naaman's servants say. If he had asked you to do something really hard, you would have done it, right? This prophet has told you to do something easy. Go wash and be clean. Why don't you try what's easy? And so then, even in his pride, even in his anger, Naaman turns and he goes to the Jordan River. He believes that if he washes 7 times in this river, that just like Elisha had said, that God would heal his skin and he would be restored. And so that's what Naaman does. He washes 1, 2, 3, waits and he gets all the way to 6. He's still not healed. And he dips down in the Jordan River for the 7th time. And he comes up and his skin is clean and restored because he believed what the prophet said. He believed what God would do. And Naaman's response back to Elisha is, I know there is no God in the whole world except the God of Israel, because only God could heal me. And this is such a cool story because it teaches preschoolers to recognize the anger that Naaman was feeling and then how he acted on it in a sinful way. This wasn't him honoring God and obeying God. He was sinful in how he responded. And yet he turned and he obeyed. And even in his anger, God could have said, okay, never mind. But he didn't. God still cared about Naaman. Naaman was angry. He sinned. He was disobedient. And still in God's kindness, he chose to heal him. And this is such a cool story of teaching how God cares when we feel mad. Now, that doesn't mean that God agrees with our sin or God just lets us sin and that's okay and that's not a big deal. It's still a big deal when we disobey, when we sin, when we act on our anger. But even in the midst of the emotions that we are feeling, God still knows and God still cares. And God is overly and abundantly kind to us to give us way more than we could ever deserve. Naaman didn't deserve healing, but God gave it to him anyway. God still healed him even after he responded in anger. And I think this is just such a great story to be and help preschoolers understand the character of God and how he is patient with us when we're angry, how he is kind to us when we don't deserve kindness, how his love for us extends beyond what we're feeling and what we're saying in the moment.
Kayla, there were so many good things, and I'm excited now to teach this at preschool this week at my church. But one thing that I'm really excited just to lean in on is that we have that choice. We have that choice to follow, hey, this is what I'm feeling, and I'm going to let my feelings take over, or this is what I'm feeling, and I'm going to follow God and what he has, and I'm going to give my feelings over to him because he cares. So in that feeling of anger, in that when I feel mad, I can make this choice of, hey, I can either give in to my anger or I can say, I know that God cares for me through this anger and make the choice to follow him. And that's a hard decision even now as adults, but that's also a hard decision for preschoolers as well, because they are experiencing these mad emotions and they really do show themselves in all sorts of ways. Some of them are going to really be loud and show you that they're angry. Some of them are going to be quiet and go to themselves when they're angry. So Rachel, how do we move beyond trying to stop behavior and help preschoolers turn to God in their anger instead of following what they want to do in their anger?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because like we talked about before, we all react to feelings of anger differently. We all respond differently, and preschoolers all respond differently. And what's really incredible about preschoolers is that they are learning and that they are teachable and fresh, and that they're experiencing this anger, but we can help them. We can coach them and explain to them that they don't have to stomp their feet. They don't have to, be huffy and turn their backs to what's going on. They don't have to scream or throw something. We can help them and coach them through that and show them they can turn to God. They can ask God for help when they're feeling angry. They can pause and try to think through, what's going on? What is it that I'm feeling? They can realize that God cares about them, even when they're feeling these feelings, and know that that it's going to pass. These emotions will pass. And I think it's such a neat opportunity as leaders that when our preschoolers feel these emotions, this anger, frustration, that we can help them. We can help coach them through how to handle it, and we can model it. Because sometimes when our preschoolers are mad and they're doing things that we are not prepared for, we can show how we're frustrated about the situation or how it makes us mad that they chose to do that. But instead, we can model for them how to handle our anger, because the emotion in itself is just an emotion, but it's what we do with it, our actions. Are we going to let the emotion pass? Are we going to calm down and ask God for help? Or are we going to respond and lash out to someone else? And so it's such a neat opportunity this week that we get to talk about anger. We get to talk about how we handle it, how we feel it, and we get to model how to respond when we feel this emotion.
I like what you ended there. We get to model how to respond in these situations. That feels like a lot of pressure sometimes. I know sometimes there are going to be moments in that classroom where there's some preschoolers that are honestly, they're right on your last nerve. Maybe you haven't had as much coffee on a Sunday morning as you normally do. Maybe there's just a lot of circumstances going on. And one of those things that we need to do as leaders is we have the opportunity to model how to deal with anger, how to deal when things are not going our way to these preschoolers. So how can a leader who has surrendered those emotions to God really have an impact on these preschoolers?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it reminds us of what a great opportunity we have, right? That it's not just our words that preschoolers are learning from, it's our actions. And as we grow in our capacity and growing in our relationship with the Lord of how we handle our own emotions, preschoolers take notice when they do something, and oftentimes do it to engage a response or a reaction out of us, and we don't respond the way they think that we will. That speaks volumes to them. When we hold our emotions and are mindful of how we are expressing ourselves in our nonverbal language to preschoolers, that speaks highly and speaks a lot to them. When we're stressed out and flustered because of all the things happening in our preschool classroom, and there are 10 more kids here than I thought there would be today, and we just feel stressed out, our preschoolers notice that too. This is probably an example you didn't ask for, but I was teaching a few weeks ago, and I was having a really hard Sunday. That Sunday in particular was just hitting me in a different way that I didn't anticipate or expect. And I was really struggling, and I had to teach preschool. And I was talking with this preschooler and was sharing something with her. And she said, "Why did you say it that way?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, you just said that like it's just like the most sad thing you've ever heard." And I was like, "Oh, well, I didn't mean it that way." And so it was a good reminder to me that, as I work through things, that like they pick up on those things. They know and they see what's going on. And so I think just being mindful is really important, and speaks a lot to preschoolers about how we respond to things, how we handle our own emotions, and how we respond to preschoolers in the midst of potential high emotion opportunities.
That's so true. And thinking about how we respond, it made me even think about like when we're talking about examples, or have you ever felt angry, or what is something, that's happened to you before, and how we can give language to that emotion. Like, oh, I have felt angry. This happened and it made me feel mad, or I'm feeling mad right now, or giving them a language for how you feel so then they can connect like you were mad, but this is what you did. And so as we tell them, oh, yes, I've experienced anger before and here's what I did, and helping them see, okay, you can feel this feeling, but you don't have to scream. You don't have to throw a toy, and help them identify, because I think with anger and all of our emotions, when we are feeling them, sometimes we're hiding them as well and letting them, then they don't even know that we're responding to an emotion we may be feeling. But in giving examples or talking about it, we can say, yes, this time I did feel this way, and this is what I did.
For sure. We have such an awesome opportunity this week to be that example to these preschoolers, to these kids, maybe even to the person who you're teaching alongside who is having a rough week also. We have such an awesome opportunity to just show how we can hand this anger, we can hand this feeling of being mad over to God, even when we want to hold it tight. And I think that's one of the most difficult things that we can do, especially in those moments where we feel a little bit like our super clue, like the teapot, where we just have a little bit of steam coming out of our ears. We feel a little bit like we have some pent up energy that we just need to release. But instead of releasing it on a kid, on a volunteer, we can release it to God and we can hand that over to Him. And I know that's a lot easier said than done. And that's honestly a truth that we've had with all of this month. When we talk about how God cares when we hurt, this isn't going to be something that suddenly all of your little preschoolers show up in August and they just have no more tantrums, they have no more sadness. No, that's not what we're saying. But when they are experiencing those feelings, we can show them, hey, God cares so much about what you are going through, and He cares about you. And that's such an exciting truth that we get to share with them this month. And next month, guess what? We get to share a brand new truth with them as well. So next month, please join us here on the podcast. We are going to be unpacking our truth for August. God has a plan for me. And I love this big deal. Look and see, God has a plan for me. And that's so exciting that we get to share that with preschoolers all next month, so you will not want to miss that. Again, thank you so much for joining us for the podcast. We can't wait to talk to you soon. Bye.